Hello everyone, today we are gonna be playing Gaming, and with that let's get into the game.
Booms and eyes and boom.
Now, I've already explained Gaming's kit in my previous videos. It's the Escoffier Gaming video if you, for whatever reason, do not know how Gaming's kit works. So instead of discussing the finer details of that, we are just quickly going to go over the game plan of this deck and then just talk about the games. Nothing special today in that regard. My deck, you can see here, we are mostly relying on Gaming solo carrying with Wolf's Gravestone. Layla here for the extra damage from the skill, and Xingqiu 1 to cleanse possible swirl decks, and second, the burst is actually pretty decent with Gaming as a combo, though in this video I do not use Xingqiu's burst once, and in fact when I was playing with this deck I didn't even use Xingqiu's burst once. So Xingqiu is here just to trick our opponents. The real combo is Gaming with Wolf's Gravestone and Edict of Absolution. The idea behind this deck, I didn't want to use a damage buffer like Ian-san or Bennett, even though, like, okay, quick mention, with Ian-san, with Bennett, you can absolutely make better Gaming decks than this one you see here. So that's a deal. Like, this deck was built with the idea that you don't need to use a damage buffer for Gaming to be good. So, once I had made this deck, the end result was basically just a bunch of extra dice. We have Kill the Dreams, of course, we have Timaeus in the deck. Unfortunately we didn't get it in our starting hand. Stone of Contracts, one upside of running Xingqiu, we get access to the Stone of Contracts. Liben you saw there already, and we also have Paimon here for all sorts of extra dice. And well, this deck, I personally have a 100% win rate against stall decks, but against aggro decks, it's 50-50, I'd say. Some aggro decks will absolutely just stomp this deck, like you have no chance of winning unless the opponent is extremely unlucky with their cards, of course, and dice rolls. But you cannot rely on that, so against aggressive decks, this, what you see here, isn't that great. But against stall decks, like my opponent's current one, I, like said, have a 100% win rate. You can see here,
Congratulations!
All we have is Gaming with Wolf's Gravestone and Layla's skill up. And we just go in, because there's no fear of a freeze or a random massive Hu Tao burst, since there's no, what is it, Rightful Reward at play. I'd at least assume my opponent is running Rightful Reward. Talent card, of course, coming in very handy. That is one of the few healing cards we have in this deck. That's actually one of the reasons why this current version of the deck isn't that great against aggressive decks. We have very little protection for Gaming. I mean, I do have Tenacity in this deck, but even those are more meant for stall matchups rather than aggro versus aggro matchups. I wouldn't even call this my like a combo deck, because like I said, we never use Xingqiu burst, and calling Layla's skill a using Layla's skill and calling that a combo deck is like feels cheating. Anyway, you see here, all you really need is the Wolf's Gravestone Gamblers. Layla's skill is a nice bonus. And the nice thing about Gaming, of course, when you have the burst buff, this one right here, because your elemental skill only costs 2 dice, all you need is the 2 dice you get from gamblers to redo another skill, which of course, well, you see here, does a bunch of damage when you have the Wolf's Greystone.
Congratulations!
I can actually go over the exact damage numbers later, but let's first get into the next game. Now I did mention that this deck is not so good against aggressive ones, and you can see here my opponent is running an aggressive deck. The Escoffier Lini combo, I actually brought that up once again in my Escoffier gaming video, that this combo works very well for single target damage. Of course, that deck is also running Hydro Tulpas, and once Lini's summon expires, you get Escoffier summon plus the Hydro Tulpas summon for even more extra damage, and when you follow that up with another Lini prop arrow, you get quite a good summon combo for the end of round 2. Of course, my opponent can also use the Escoffier's Elemental skill plus Hydro Tulpas skill to freeze my characters, but that is the benefit of running Edict of Absolution. We do not need to fear freeze reactions. You can see here my opponent is going for a triple skill with the fish and chips. And luckily I used the Layla skill instead of going for full ramp, since Layla actually gets taken out here at the end by my opponent's summons. But of course this is perfectly fine, all we need from Layla is the shooting stars. Also, Hydro Tulpa dealing damage to self is very good for me when we are running the Wolf's Gravestone, since it gets closer to the breakpoint needed for the Wolf's Gravestone damage buff to activate. Checking what we get with Dunyazad here, and playing the Wolf's Gravestone. Unfortunately, because we are running Edict of Absolution, I have no way of... Edict of Absolution is 10 times better than running Ancient Courtyard in this deck, since we are relying on Gaming to wipe the opponent team. If this was like the... If you were using, for example, Ian-san, then... because Ian-san also likes to use weapons, like Moonpiercer on Ian-san is a very good choice, and in those cases Ancient Courtyard instead of Edict of Absolution is a good choice. Not to mention with Ian-san you want to switch characters to refresh the Night Soul points, so staying on one character with, well, staying on Gaming with the Edict of Absolution is not so great. But in this deck we are unfortunately not running anything else but Golden House to discount the Wolf's Gravestone, which means we often have to spend a bunch of dice, like in this case, to actually do the skills. By the way, of course, I picked Gaming there at the end of last round when Layla got taken out by the summons, because of course the skill switches us right to Xingqiu, and there's no fear of Gaming taking any damage.
No, my soul.
Here we actually do get to use Xingqiu a little to cleanse the pyro to make sure my opponent gets a little less reactions, and of course we get the rain sword to protect us from the bigger chunks of damage. I opt to go for Timaeus and Gilded Dreams combo instead of Golden Droop here, simply because we can get cards from the Gilded Dreams. You can see here Rain Sword making sure that Xingqiu survives with 1 HP, very good for me. The dice aren't that great though, which is very unfortunate, so we have to play the Gilded Dreams on the Xingqiu, but luckily the Shooting Star activates, so we still get a card here. And now we have a bunch of quite unnecessary cards we can simply tune here.
Let's get this show on the
Here
road.
I think my opponent made a mistake. Going for the Elemental skill would have been better simply so that Ga-Ming doesn't get the Wolf's Greystone damage buff to take out Lini. They should have gone for the skill. Going for the burst was a big
Is there time to
mistake.
sneak in some dim sum first?
Also, this way,
My soul mustn't
now,
fail.
you see I haven't played Edict of Absolution yet, and if your character is frozen when you play Edict of Absolution, it doesn't unfreeze them. Your character stays frozen if they have been frozen before playing Edict of Absolution. So if my opponent had gone for the skill, they would have had a bigger chance to activate the Escoffier summon with the Tulpas skill here. I of course, like, I could have, when I used the Sink Shoe skill, I could have pre-played Edict of Absolution on the Ga-Ming here. Like, absolutely, but I decided to take my chances. I knew it was risky, but I decided to simply, like, even the 1 out of 3 chance, most often I would win that. And like the only way my opponent would have won here is with Escoffier's cooking mech activating with that skill. Because I'm pretty sure, even though I could have played like this combo for next round, all they would have needed to do is Hydro Tulpa burst. And well, no, actually this summons would expire. Well, anyway, I don't think I would have had that much HP left, and the burst is still 4. Well, actually I could have won either way now that if I got healing or damage reduction from the Mystic Soup, I think I could have won either way, since... Or is that like 2... No, actually no, the summons would have taken me out, right? No, no. I would have won either way because I had these cards, yeah. In this case I simply won because I could sweep them right like this. Even got Providence there to make the use of dice easier. We go for the burst, of course, simply because now the skill is 3. We have the Providence, and the burst buff also decreases the elemental skill cost by 1. So we actually have a free elemental skill currently. You're gonna see here when I do it, we do not consume any dice. And even here, like, even if we don't get the Wolf's Greystone buff, we do get the melt because the Escoffier was frozen, and we even have the shooting star to activate and finish the game.
It over my
On to the next one. Now in this match, I want to point out, like I said, this deck is not good against aggressive decks. And while I personally consider most APEP decks to be mid-range, I do think the version that uses the Dragon Lord, especially with Xinyan, like this version, like I have played this APEP deck. Maybe my version, because I like to play it a little slow. My version is could probably be considered mid-range deck, but my opponent's version here, I would say, is an aggressive deck. And as such, this is a good example of how aggressive decks are actually a bad matchup, because my deck, like if it hasn't been clear yet, we rely on heavy setup. We have our Paimons, we have our Timaeuses, we have Tenacities and Golden Ropes. Like, we rely on heavy setup. And of course getting the Wolf's Greystone. Like, in many of these replays you may notice I keep Wolf's Greystone in my starting hand simply because it's so important to get as soon as possible with this deck. Our opponent doing quite normal APEP things, discarding what they can and looking for the APEP summons. Here I could play the Edict of Absolution. The reason why I do not is of course because we have Sing Your Heart out, meaning our swap back to Gaming here will be free anyway. I decided to go for Liben because I'm expecting my opponent to simply use a Xingyan skill, minimizing the amount of damage Gaming would actually do here, even if we went for a switchback normal attack 10 as skill. Though in retrospect I probably should have done that simply so that I can match the damage my opponent does with the summons. And now of course I also have to fear Xingyan's burst. And you can see Liben doesn't actually give us anything that special, so in retrospect it would have been better to just go for a Gaming normal attack plus another skill last round. Here I actually end up playing the Edict of Absolution, especially because Gaming has now taken damage, so we get full value from it. Of course, because my opponent is running double Kusawa and Conductor's Top Hat, there's actually quite a lot of dice reduction they have, so they can actually do quite a lot here this round as well. Also, the dragon now has the first resentment stack, so it is starting to look a little scary for me.
Congratulations!
You can see here we did quite a good amount of damage, but unfortunately we do not have the dice to finish off any of the characters. Like, I don't actually know, I don't think that I have that many cards live and could have given me to actually wipe out or do one more skill there to take out. Because you can see, because we have the gamblers, all I really would have needed there was one more dice last round and I could have probably wiped the opponent's whole team. Like with the same combo you saw in the first match, because we have the burst up and we have gamblers. It basically means you get to wipe the entire opponent team. I go for a Xingqiu skill here. Because of course with the resentment stack the dragon would have taken out Gaming with one hit, so using Xingqiu was a decent choice here, or more precisely the only good choice. But of course now my opponent has Apep's burst and Apep is already in buff mode and I have no Mystic Soup in hand to increase my damage any further, so my opponent actually wins the game here with an Apep burst. So as you can see, my deck is not that great against aggressive decks, simply because we rely so heavily on getting set up, and of course aggressive decks like to take advantage when their opponents do set up. Anyway, let's get into the next game. Now, here in this next one, I would also say this is an aggressive deck, what my opponent here is running. You're gonna see we, well, keeping the talent card was probably not necessary, but once again we kept the Wolf's Gravestone in the starting hand simply because we know we need it. Also because I was kind of expecting my opponent here at the start to go for a Raiden burst. You saw, instead of going for the Layla skill at the start, I was planning on going for Gaming skill plus normal attack combo, but then I get stone contracts from the strategize, and well, then I decided, well in the end you see what I ended up doing here. I end with Xingqiu hoping to cleanse the Eye of Stormy Judgment, but my opponent actually goes to the Rock Bearer, and of course I don't want to give the Rock Bearer any reason to get the Might of Stone bonus damage, because of course both Layla's skill and Xingqiu's skill will give me either shields or damage reduction, and that will give my opponent the Might of Stone buff.
Can't sleep. Let's go for a walk.
You can see here I'm actually made quite a clever move. I switch to Layla so that I still have no damage reduction or shields. My opponent goes for the burst from the rock guy, and because rock guy doesn't actually get Might of Stone with these prepare skills when the rock guy uses a burst. I explained this in my rock guy video, but basically when you use the burst, only the first activation, this like when you prepare the Great Axe Strike, only that one can give you the Might of Stone stack. The follow-up prepare skill for the Master Strike will not give you a Might of Stone stack, which means I can use Layla's skill now, and my opponent doesn't get any sort of buff for the rock guy. You can see here no Might of Stone, even though I had a shield. My opponent actually, this was an idea that came to mind after my previous rock guy video, because the rock guy, Black Serpent Knight, both of these two parts of the burst are considered, these are both burst, elemental burst, meaning both parts are actually buffed by the Eye of Stormy Judgment. You can see here my opponent will do 4 damage with the Master Strike, like so. So it's quite the clever combo my opponent is running to buff the Serpent Knight's, the rock guy's burst damage very easily.
This is just a...
I actually decided to go for a Gaming here because we will immediately do a normal attack, which will give us 2 energy, and when we have 2 energy, the Lightning Electro Abyss Lector's burst will actually do reduced damage, or doesn't get the increased damage because we have 2 or more energy. But my opponent is actually running the Vicious Ancient Battle Arcane card, and even you saw there was an Adeptus, meaning that they almost snipe Gaming, which of course would have cost me the entire game if they had done so. We get Providence there, and of course go for a skill without the Edict of Absolution, because Abyss Lector will revive and get the damage bonus, so there's no way to keep Gaming alive.
Rain outlines your fate.
Going for the Xingqiu skill here will actually be very important for the future, even though the Rain Sword now gives the my opponent possibility to get the Might of Stone stacks and extra extra damage, but my opponent actually had an extra dice to go for the Raiden burst here, which means the Xingqiu skill was extremely good, because now Xingqiu survives with 1 HP thanks to the Rain Sword. And of course now the rock guy gets the Might of Stone stack for the first time.
Is there time to sneak in some dim sum first?
But now my opponent is out of dice.
Detached from the...
It's starting to look pretty good for me. I can even play the talent card here. We even go for the Edict of Absolution. Make sure we get a full combo here, because the Shooting Star will activate, the Abyss Lector will be at 1 HP, and of course I have no fear of, for example, another Adeptus Burst, because my opponent has already played their Arcane card. So in that regard there's nothing to fear. My opponent actually has the emblem of Severed Fate, you know, increasing the burst damage by 2, and with that they are able to take down Calming, but like mentioned, they have already spent their Arcane Guard, there's nothing to worry about. But you see here, aggro decks are still a tough matchup, like Xingqiu with 1 HP winning the game. Very, very close. Anyway, let's get into the last game of today. And for the last game, I thought it would be good to show that what I claimed there at the start, I have a 100% win rate against stall decks with this deck. And well, in this matchup, actually quick mention, in this game I have now done a couple tiny teeny changes to the deck. We are now running only one Paimon, and instead of another Paimon we are running one Macaronis to help Calming stay alive. Unfortunately, I didn't actually get any aggressive deck matchups when I was running this updated version, so I cannot actually say if the Macaronis help anything against aggro decks. I was also considering Lotus Crisp, of course, but we already are running double Mystic Soup, and Mystic Soup is basically the same deal as having Lotus Crisp. So I thought Macaronis would be a better choice. Starting dice not that great, but luckily we get Timaeus and we get the Tenacity, so we can actually spend all of our dice here. Of course we are running double Gilded Dreams still, so Timaeus will get value in the future as long as we draw Gilded Dreams or another Tenacity, why not? Of course, doing full setup against a stall deck is very important because we need quite a lot of dice to wipe the opponent in one round. Lucky for me, they do not get the Bond of Light artifact here at the very beginning, so they cannot actually increase their max HP here at the start. Of course, very good for me because I'm aiming for round 3 wipe. You can see here we got the Wolf's Greystone, we got the talent card, we have basically everything we need for a wipe. What we do here at the
night is cold.
End, well, round 2, you can see we do full setup.
Off to the freezer.
I make a slight mistake here. I should have tuned either another of the talent cards or the Wolf's Gravestone, the other copy here, but I actually forget to do that when I switch characters, because I could have, of course, procced Liben here by the Tenacity giving me a dice. So a slight misplay right there. I forgot to tune one card, but don't worry, it will not be a big mistake. Another Timaeus, that would mean we have quite a good chance of getting Gilded Dreams when playing him on the field. Once again, we do not go for the Edict of Absolution yet, because we have to sing your heart out.
Is there time to sneak in some dim sum
And
first?
we can free switch and, well, play the game a little slower, so my opponent has to spend their dice before they can do anything. Bunch of food cards, of course they are. Of course they are trying to stay alive here. I actually, out of fear that they might have some shenanigans going on here, I did not play Edict of Absolution yet, and instead I'm planning to go for Timaeus plus Liebenbrock here, and round 4 wipe my opponent. Of course, tuning one card to make sure we do not overdraw, and there is the Gilded Dreams. Of course, now my opponent gets to heal a bit of the damage they have taken, but it shouldn't be too bad since we are going to have Liben plus double Timaeus with 3 stacks here. And there we go with the second Gilded Dreams.
Got it.
Very,
Start
very
my warm-up
lucky.
routine.
A burst of flavor.
Also, one thing about this deck, because I have so much set up, I don't actually have Liar Song in the deck. But you could absolutely replace maybe one talent card, maybe get rid of the Paimon and get double Liar Song if playing with Gilded Dreams plus Liar Song is more to your liking. I simply rely on the fact that we have so many extra dice cards that we don't need Liar Song for that surprise couple dice.
Many happy returns!
Of course, now we played the Arcane Edict of Absolution because Furina would otherwise freeze Gami. But now you can see my opponent is practically out of dice, and I can start playing with the Gilded Dreams here to wipe them. Of course, the activation of Genu Whale actually was quite close, and if they got this, it would have been quite bad for me because one of their characters would get full HP back, plus the couple max HP.
My head.
But here, when we play the second Gilded Dreams, my opponent knows it's over for them and they give up. Anyway, that's gonna be all for today. I'll see you all in the next video.